All right, I'm here with Levi Miller. I'm very happy to have him here. Levi, incredibly accomplished career at Belfast, three-time All-New England finisher at New England's. So runner-up in 2004, state champion. I could go on and on about all your accomplishments right now. You're really one of the just true all-time talents in Maine high school history. But first, I just want to know, how are you holding up during this whole pandemic, and what are you up to right now?
Yeah, so Sam, thanks for having me on. I am Zooming with you from Marin County, California, just a little north of San Francisco. And I'm happy and healthy. My wife and I live in Fairfax in Marin County, and I'm still luckily gainfully employed with the Nature Conservancy, who I've been working for about 8 years. But holding up okay. We have our health, our families are healthy. On the running side, we live close to beautiful trails and are blessed with good springtime California weather. So getting outside every day and life is good. So we're pretty privileged.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing, that you're all just staying healthy and staying active and everything.
For sure.
And I guess one of the biggest things that I was most excited about doing this with you is that I felt like when you competed, it was almost like a golden age during that era. You had so many competitors. It was you, it was Ben True, Eric Giddings, the Tays, Brandon. And I want to know from your perspective, when you're competing during that time, do you realize how special or how competitive that era is, or did it take you a little while to kind of realize, wow, this group of guys, this was an amazing time to compete?
Yeah, that's a great question. And now, so we're sitting here in 2020, and I finished at Belfast in 2005. So we're 15 years out, and even beyond high school, before that, I don't think I understood that Maine, and then also kind of the mid-coast area where I was from, was a pretty unique place, and that the town of Belfast, 5,000 or 6,000 people, we still had multiple road races when I was a kid happening throughout the year, and unfortunately, that's not happening anymore. But you do these things as a kid. I did my first road races, the Child Shall Lead, and then the Pancake 5K. And you'd have hundreds of people out to take part in that. So that was kind of my starting point, was just being around people on the main road racing scene and who were really involved with it. And then, that kind of continued right through all of the Junior Olympic stuff and summer track that the state of Maine did a great job putting on. And then, in high school, I don't think I did understand how unique the people that I was surrounded by were. And I think it took until going to college to take a step back and be like, wow, all these guys are competing on a national stage. Brandon and I, of course, went to Georgetown along with Ayalu later. Sentayu went to UVA. We had Ben True at Dartmouth. Eric Giddings went to Stanford, national caliber schools. And it all came from a state with around 1 million people. So you're I remember, my freshman year, my peers on the team were from Minneapolis, a metro area with more than the state of Maine's full population. Phoenix, same thing. And then also Nashville, Tennessee. And, just to think back on what the state of Maine was producing at that time in distance runners, that was far equivalent to many of the big states around the country. So right. I don't think I knew it at the time, but it took leaving to then reflect and be wow, that's pretty cool that was happening. And I think we had people from years prior, kind of when I was growing up, it was Louis Lucchini that I kind of looked up to, just as someone from the area that was excelling at a national stage, and other people like that. So there had been glimpses of that over the years, but then those few years with those guys were packed. And then you had Riley Masters coming right in the tail end of that, who was, competing at a super high level. So I didn't know it at the time, but now looking back, I'm that's pretty badass that you could be running into those guys at dual meets or whatever. Right. yeah, everyone was talented and invested in the sport.
So kind of going off of that, when you're competing during that time, in this day and age, you can check what somebody runs on mile split, see what they do, and then they can be like, all right, I want to go run this. I mean, you didn't really have that access at the time. I mean, I know you would talk to Brandon, obviously, like he might run X time at, in Cumberland. Like, did that motivate you at all? Maybe seeing like, maybe look into the paper, seeing like, oh, Ben ran 15X at some course. I want to try and run this time at Belfast or something.
Oh, for sure. And I'm actually not envious of the access to information that young athletes have now. Like, I think the upside of that is people are seeing what other people are doing. And you can see high school running and collegiate running in the last 10 to 15 years has exploded in terms of the depth at the top. Like the really top finishes are pretty much the same, but you've got this like top tier,
right?
That like so many kids are breaking 9 minutes now. And I remember running 9:12 and I felt like I was like near the top. Now that's a little different now. But I'm glad I didn't have access to all that. I basically would get the Bangor Daily News or go on, I actually could go on sub5.com, the sub5
right.
track club out of Old Town. Hope they're still going. But to be able to look at like dual meets that were happening in the northern part of the state with Bangor Daily, and then I get like the Sunday Press Herald from Portland, and I'd see what Brandon and Ben Shrew were doing. And it was definitely motivating. But I'm glad that I just got those simple metrics because it allowed me to really just be focused on what I was doing, which was like working hard every day and not getting caught up in what I imagine is honestly probably a tough time to be a young athlete,
Right.
where you're like watching what your peers are doing all the time. Like running social media is insane now. Even as someone who's like not as into the sport as I once was, like there's no limit to the amount of content. So I'm glad I was pretty much limited to like seeing what, Ben Shrew ran at the Mount Blue relays once a week or like once every month. I think that was a healthy level for a young kid who was personally motivated but didn't need a lot of like outside perspective to get him going.
I kind of want to go back to, I was looking at some of your results the other day just to kind of like refresh my mind on you. And one thing that really struck me was your Festival of Champions race, your senior year, ran 15:35, and you really just dominated that race. And that was like what, the first or second year of that Festival of Champions?
Yeah.
And that time, that still really holds up. And you went like pretty unchallenged. And I just want to know, like, I mean, if you remember any thoughts from that race, like leading up into the warm-ups, like was there any sense that you were just like, okay, I am so ready to just run this time? Like, was it during the warm-up? Was it right before the gun? Anything like that?
Yeah, well, I'm glad that time is still on the list. Dale and Joanne Neely, who, still to this day run that whole program at Belfast and that race course and meet, I've given them flack because I heard they put down a lot of stone dust on the mushy spots. So I was afraid my true soggy grass time would just get kicked off the lists over the years. But I think that year, so that's the end of 2004. I had kind of like slowly progressed year after year and knew I was kind of on the top of the state. Finally, I had Ben Shrew out of the mix, so I was stoked. I was finally able to win a state championship and not have to be looking at Ben's back. But yeah, I think there was a lot of pride in that race happened in my backyard. I grew up half a mile away from that course, so still when I go home, I get my feet on those paths. But I knew I was ready to run something really fast, and I would probably be on my own. I think the year before there had been a few more guys who I could run with for a couple miles, but it was definitely like a a race of just pride, home course. A lot of people from all over the state in New England come in for it. And I really just wanted to blast something really fast. And at that point, it was starting to shift to that was becoming a regional and state meet course as well. So I definitely wanted to put up a time that could, stand the test of time. And I'm glad it did.
Yeah.
I think, the fastest time there is probably in the 15:20s now, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's actually like 15:0 something or like 15:10.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's impressive. But I do remember, not in that particular meet, but it was the state meet that year, because I think the state meet, either my junior or senior year, was on that course as well. And I remember we went first, and I didn't run as fast as I had in the Festival of Champions, but I ran like maybe in the 15:40s. And it had gotten moved from Augusta because it was so wet at Augusta, so they brought it to this course. I remember then Class A went, and Ayalu, Eric Giddings, and Sintayu went through the 2-mile in like 9:40 or something like that. And I remember being like, oh no, like my record's gonna get broken. Unfortunately, like they had a big positive split. I don't know who won, but I remember like them not breaking that time and thinking like, all right, I'm good for a while. But yeah, a lot of fond memories of that race and that course, and pretty cool.
Yeah, and then you followed that race. That was your runner-up finish at New England, right?
It was, yeah. That was in Manchester, Connecticut. I know there's a Manchester in every state in New England. I think it was Manchester, Connecticut. It was a super snowy year. And yeah, I ended up second behind, I believe, Corey Thorne might have won, who went on to race at Louisville. He was a great steeplechaser at Louisville. And so I ran into him for the next 5 years. And I remember there was a guy that's super talented who was in that race, Gore Majak, who was from Connecticut. And Gore had like my number at every New England race for years. And I remember like 1,000 meters to go, 2,000 meters to go or something. I passed Gore Majak and moved like into whatever, third or fourth at the time. And I remember Gore looked over at me and just stopped. He just cold stopped. And it was both a thrill of knowing that I was, either going to win or be in second, but also that like the time that I finally beat Gore Majak, he decided to call it quits right when I passed him. But yeah, I remember that super snowy year. Yeah, I think I was maybe second by 10 seconds or so behind Corey Thorne.
One thing that always impressed me about you was just like how good you were so young. I mean, I had my older brother Brandon competing against you at like Junior Olympics. Like you're either right on his heels or beating him. I idolized Brandon, and I thought he walked on water. Then you coming in, you're just like, holy crap, who's this kid? And I know our families know each other, but I guess going off of that, with how good you were at such a young age, what did that do for your confidence heading into the high school level?
Yeah, that's great, Sam. And we have such a long history. It's cool to just, even have this venue to talk about these things. Running was a part of my life from like a super early age. The field behind my house was like 5 laps to a mile. And I had a kid who lived next door who was on the cross country team when I was like in elementary school. And he used to get me out there with a stopwatch, and he'd get me sprinting around our field when I was like 8 or 9 to do timed miles. And I remember kind of like going through elementary school, and then even, I guess like around 5th grade thinking, oh my God, I can't wait to be on the middle school scene, to like be on a cross country team. Like that's amazing. And I was jumping in road races at the time. Like I remember one that Brandon and I joke about is I ran like a 36-minute road 10K when I was like in 5th grade or something, which even now, like that might be my greatest running performance that I have. It's like clicking off sub-6s as a 4'8", 85-pound human being. I remember by the time getting close to high school, I was just like itching to be with guys that were really good. In my local proximity, we had Stephen DeWitt, who went on to run at Stanford, and he was running like at a high level, running around 4:10, 4:12, as well as like pretty low 9-minute 2 miles. And I remember just wanting to be there. I remember wanting to race people. I remember wanting to, I think I had a lot of confidence that I probably couldn't necessarily prove out in other sports. Like I played a lot of sports growing up, but I always was able to like come back to running. And it was like a self-acknowledging thing where I was like, yeah, I know I'm good at this thing. I can't wait to be able to do it on a level that it's like recognized as high school sports. So huge motivating factor. And also knowing that I had great high school coaches going in was a big thing. Like I knew I was going to have people who were looking out for me, and then a lot of older guys that I kind of looked up to and was pretty excited about practicing with them and hanging out with them. So.
And then obviously you continued your career at Georgetown, and I'm sure Brandon going there had some influence on your decision a little bit. But what was it that really drew you to that school?
It's funny. I remember I was a pretty oblivious. I mean, I don't know if I was a pretty oblivious, like 16 or 17-year-old to the recruiting process. And also, I think that was mirrored by the fact that I didn't have a lot of people that I was close to who had been through that process themselves. Being in Belfast, like I didn't have a lot of people who were going to D1 schools for any sports. So I actually vividly remember being at your home in Falmouth, and I was maybe too much information, but I was in the restroom, and there was a Georgetown track and field pamphlet, and Brandon had like a stack of them. But I remember thinking, oh, I want to be, in my mind at the time, like I want to be in the East somewhere. I want to go to a good academic school, and I want to go to a top 10 program. So as the recruiting process starts to filter, I was heavily looking at Northern Arizona. I checked a couple of those boxes. It was a really good program, solid academics, probably not on par with Georgetown, but it was like one of the best places to train in the world. So I loved a recruiting trip there. I was like passively looking at Iona because they had been a top 10 cross-country program in those years. William and Mary as well, with kind of a Matt Lane legacy there from Maine. But then Georgetown kind of checked all the boxes. I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to go there, and that was a huge motivating factor. But then on my recruiting trip, I happened to be there with a couple of the best guys in the country who are also visiting, and one of which is Andrew Bumbelow, who's gone on to be, a 2:10 marathoner, 3:55 miler, like insane. And he was at the time the best high school recruit in the country. And on our recruiting trip, I remember thinking like, wow, like if this dude comes here, it's like that. You kind of need a little bit of subjectivity at that time in your life to understand like you're making the right choice. And I remember just thinking, oh, this guy who ran 8:49 for 2 miles is going to come here. I should definitely go. But on top of that, like I knew how strong the program was. I knew I'd walk out there with a great diploma. And then of course my dear friend and your brother, Brandon, was a year ahead of me there. And so I had some kind of peer advice on what the quality of that place was. So that really helped a lot.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I guess as we kind of wrap up things here, kind of ask you, when you look back on your high school career, what was maybe like your fondest memory? Was there a specific race or even just like maybe some little moments with your team? Like, is there any notable event that kind of sticks out in your mind when you look back?
Yeah, so many things. I'm glad you mentioned the Festival of Champions. Like, I think that was, when I reflect, it was just so cool that it was in my backyard. I remember we had people all over New England who would travel in for that. and I'd kind of like roll out of bed and have some breakfast and drive 2 minutes. And I just remember, the crowds there, people encircling the race course, and actually feeling, at my childhood middle school, like it was a national caliber event. Like I remember, I think back on that a lot. I remember we had these nighttime races in the track season. We did one each year, and we'd run like a fast 2 mile each year. I think I did it my sophomore, junior, and senior year, and we would like blare music over the loudspeakers, kind of Friday Night Lights style, during the races. And I always elected for Freebird by Leonard Skinner to be playing during the 2 mile because it's so long. So yeah, I just, that time is just so fond. I mean, I have so many great friends, not only through high school running, but college and post-collegiate, that it shaped my life in a way that I can't even understand yet. But yeah, it's phenomenal to kind of sit here and talk to you and think about what an important time that was in my life, and probably how it kind of like shaped the next 5, 10, 15 years. But yeah, a lot of fond memories. And yeah, I'm thankful that I was surrounded by good coaching, good friends, and people at Belfast and then across the state who were competing at a high level. So it was pretty cool.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate you doing this interview.
Of course, Sam. Great to talk to you. We should do this more often.
Absolutely.